Okay, let's get to the bottom of it. When you get past all the pop culture stuff, you know, the couches and the ink blots, what is psychology, really? Now pay close attention to that first word, scientific. That is absolutely the key. This isn't just about guessing how people feel. Psychology is a real, rigorous science. It uses actual evidence to study everything from our actions that everyone can see to the invisible inner world of our thoughts and even our unconscious drives. It's kind of part natural science because it looks at the brain's biology, and part social science because it looks at how we act in groups. But, it didn't just start out that way. Not at all. The journey to becoming a real science was a long one. It had to evolve from these big, ancient philosophical debates into what we see today, a modern laboratory science. The real revolution, the big game changer, wasn't in the answers. It was in the questions people started asking. For centuries, you had philosophers like Plato and Aristotle debating the nature of the soul. But modern psychology? It was born when the questions became something you could actually test. Instead of asking, what is the soul? Pioneers started asking, hey, how can we measure how someone perceives something? That single shift from the philosophical to the measurable, well, that's what turned all this into a science. And you can literally see that shift happening right here on this timeline. We take this massive leap from ancient Greece all the way to 1879. That's when Wilhelm Wundt opens the very first experimental psychology lab. Think about that. For the first time ever, the mind was being studied with experiments. Then, just a little over a decade later, William James comes along and gives us this beautiful idea of a stream of consciousness. And right after that, John B. Watson basically doubles down on the science part, arguing we should only study what we can actually see, behavior. Each one of these steps was a huge push forward. But here's the thing. There isn't just one single way to study the mind. The whole field is really made up of all these different schools of thought, and each one gives us a totally unique lens for looking at why people do what they do. The best way to think about it is like this. Trying to understand the mind with just one theory is like trying to describe a huge, bustling city by looking through only one tiny window. It's just not going to work, right? To get the full picture, you need to look from a bunch of different windows. And these are the main lenses, the main windows. The biological folks are looking at our hardware, the brain, our genes, all the chemicals. The behaviorists, they pretty much ignore what's inside and just focus on how our environment shapes us through rewards and punishments. Then the cognitive school dives right back inside our heads to look at our mental software, things like memory, perception, and language. Social psychology looks at how the group affects the individual, while the psychoanalytic lens digs way, way down into our unconscious minds. And finally, the existential humanistic view is all about our search for meaning and free will. Each one offers a totally different but super important piece of the puzzle. Okay, so because psychology has all these different ways of looking at things, its use in the real world goes far, far beyond the therapist's office. I mean, seriously, psychologists are everywhere. They're in schools, figuring out better ways to teach our kids. They're in the workplace, making jobs more satisfying and productive. They're in hospitals, the legal system, the military. They're even working with professional athletes to help them get a mental edge. The applications are just incredibly diverse. And if you want to get a sense of just how diverse the field is, look at this number, 54. That's how many different divisions the American Psychological Association has. 54. That covers everything from the psychology of religion, to military psychology, to studying the psychology of art. It is a massive, massive field. And psychology doesn't just describe the world. Sometimes it actually helps change it. A really powerful example of this is the work of two psychologists, Kenneth and Mamie Clark. Their research showed the deeply harmful psychological effects that segregation had on African American children. And that research, it was actually cited in the landmark 1954 Supreme Court case, Brown v. Board of Education, that ended legal segregation in American public schools. I mean, that's psychology having a profound impact on society. But like any good science, psychology isn't just sitting back, content with what it already knows. It is constantly questioning itself, it's evolving, and it's always trying to get better. One of the biggest strengths of any real science is its ability to self-correct, and psychology is no different. In the last several years, the field has been dealing with what's called a replication crisis, which is basically where some classic, old studies haven't held up when other scientists tried to repeat them. But this has actually sparked a really positive change, a huge push for more rigorous, more transparent research, and honestly, a healthy dose of scientific humility. And this reveals another huge challenge. For a very long time, what we called human psychology was really just the psychology of a very specific, very small group of people. People from Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic societies. We call them weird societies. And get this, 96% of people in psychology studies came from countries that only make up 12% of the world's population. So where does all this leave us? Well, we have these incredible new tools that let us literally see the brain in action, and we're learning more than ever before. But that leaves us with this one fascinating final question to chew on. As we get better and better at mapping the brain's complicated wiring, are the great mysteries of who we are, our consciousness, our identity, going to get simpler? Or are we going to find that the deeper we look, the more wonderfully complex we realize we